We're keeping you posted on that throughout the show and will continue to do so as it happens. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's a principal at the BGR Group and senior fellow at the National Security Institute at George Mason University in Washington, D.C. Lester Munson. Good afternoon, Lester.
Hey, Kevin. Good to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. What is your take on the situation? How do you analyse it? What do you think is going on? Is this the beginning of the end for Putin? As I say, when this show started only an hour or so ago, we thought that Prigozhin and his Wagner group were 250 miles away from Moscow, marching towards the Russian capital. We're now here, and we've seen footage of explosions, bombs being dropped. We're now here, they're 50 miles from Moscow. This is getting serious.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing and dramatic events we've seen just in the last few hours. I think we really only found out about any kind of trouble like this last night here in DC time. So this has been very dramatic, very fast. It's clear the Wagner group was planning this for quite some time. The planning appears to have been pretty effective. They're moving very fast towards Moscow. They overtook that southern district military headquarters without firing a shot. So it's also clear that some of the regular Russian forces appear to be either just surrendering or collaborating with the Wagner group.
And what would be your analysis of the way America will react to this? Obviously, Biden will be watching very, very closely, looking at developments as they happen. But how will, in your estimation, America and I guess the West react to this?
Well, it's a great question, and I don't want to predict what President Biden will do, but I'll say some of the things he's weighing have to be the fact that Russia has more nuclear weapons than any other country on Earth. So everything that is going on with respect to who controls the Russian government is important to the United States and everyone else. So I suspect that we're devoting a lot of our national intelligence infrastructure and other capabilities that we have to make sure the president has all the latest information on what's happening and who's in charge and that kind of thing. We also have to weigh what the impact of this will be on the war in Ukraine. The withdrawal of the Wagner group and possibly other Russian forces is a huge opportunity for the Ukrainians to take back their territory that was taken from them 16 months ago and 8 years ago, 9 years ago now in 2014. So there's a lot of things to keep track of. I think it's highly unlikely the U.S. or any other NATO country or anyone else will become directly involved in this conflict. That would seem to be a bridge too far. The situation's incredibly complicated. It's hard to predict what the next steps will be, who's going to prevail, who's going to end up on which side of this revolt, coup, civil war, insurrection, some combination of all four of those things. We're not even really exactly sure how to characterize what's happened thus far. So I think the president's going to act with great caution, but we'll be paying very close attention.
Let me ask you this, Lester. I used this phrase earlier. A rat is dangerous. A cornered rat can be lethal. Now, in his desperation, and I think we're seeing signs that Putin is now desperate. The speech he made to his people, he looked nervous, he looked pale, and his voice was actually faltering as he made this speech, accusing Prigozhin of stabbing him in the back, of treason. It was a very... what's the word? It was a dramatic and nervous speech. Now, so this guy could be on his last legs. Now, as I say, a cornered rat is a rat is dangerous. A cornered rat can be lethal. In his desperation, if we interpret this as a desperate situation for Putin, do you think he's capable of going rogue and pressing the nuclear button?
Well, you don't want to predict something like that. What does pressing the nuclear button mean? It's something we should absolutely be paying attention to. He has a lot of nuclear weapons. He has more tactical nuclear weapons also than any other country in the world. Also, there was this very strange arrangement from a few days ago where Putin decided to transfer some nuclear weapons to Belarus. Notably, the leader of Belarus, Lukashenko, has left Belarus. So there's a lot of fog of war here, unclear who's in charge of what. Is it possible he could use nuclear weapons? Of course. He's threatened it in the past. It seems to be a serious threat. Obviously, he hasn't done it so far, but it's something that has to be taken into consideration.
How would you estimate that the Russian people are feeling about this? Because they don't necessarily get treated to the full news, do they? Journalistically, they're often kept in the dark, but I don't know what they're seeing now. But is there a sense in Russia, do you think, Lester, that the people are beginning to say this war is a folly, Putin has taken us into a hopeless situation, and perhaps the Russian people have had enough of Vladimir?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know for sure. I suspect that the Russian people who feel very strongly about Ukraine, that Ukraine is, the simple way of putting it is a lot of Russians feel very strongly that Ukraine is part of Russia. So Putin's invasion to them was something that should have been done and it needed to be done. They're wrong, in my view, but that is certainly a thought among the Russian people. Notably, Prigozhin, when he was beginning this operation where it looks like he's trying to take power in Moscow, began by questioning the original premise from Putin for the invasion of Ukraine. He said February 24th, 2022 was a day just like any other, very strongly implying that Ukraine was not getting ready to invade Russia, as Putin had said was the premise for Russia attacking Ukraine. So Prigozhin went right at the heart of the rationale for the invasion that began 16 months ago. So that's very much part of what is happening now. Also, it's important to bear in mind, Prigozhin, as the head of the Wagner group, 20,000 of his soldiers, of men under his command, were killed by the Ukrainians. He has to answer for that. Either he's going to take responsibility or he's going to put that responsibility on the Russian defense ministry and indeed Putin himself. And it appears that he is acting in such a way as to indicate to his people, this is the fault of President Putin and his defense ministry. The reason our people died, people in the Wagner group, is because of decisions made by Putin. So this is, in a way, Prigozhin is actually also a cornered rat here. He was probably in danger from his own people for presiding over such a slaughter around Bakhmut over the last few months. So there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of death, there's maybe at least two cornered rats here, Kevin. And so again, really hard to predict exactly what's going to happen, but this is extraordinarily serious.
What do we know about Yevgeny Prigozhin? His extraordinary life story. I mean, he did 9 years in jail for common thievery. He was just a thug and a thief. Took to selling hot dogs with his family in St. Petersburg. That begat a kind of grocery business, the first chain of grocery stores in St. Petersburg. Then he went into the restaurant business where he met Putin, became Putin's private chef. Now he's like his private army guy. Right. But we've seen video of him raging away about where's the weapons, using all sorts of flowery language that we can't repeat on a family show. But he seems like a frightening character.
Yeah, he's got that timbre in his voice that seems to resonate. And so while he doesn't look like a very charismatic individual, I think if you're a Russian speaker and you hear that sound and that anger, it must resonate in a way that non-Russian speakers find it hard to understand. He's, in addition to what you said, it's important to note he's got a lot of experience overthrowing governments. This is what the Wagner group has been doing in Africa for years. He's basically running the Central African Republic at this point. His troops are in many other places in the Sahel, in Africa, and other countries. So the things that he's doing now, this is not his first rodeo. He has done this before, and he's done it successfully. This is a huge threat to Vladimir Putin, and Putin knows it.
Now, you said earlier that, in your estimation, and it certainly makes sense, that Prigozhin has been planning this for some time. I'm wondering, now that he's just 50 miles from Moscow, where they've set up machine gun posts to try and repel this invasion, has he got allies in the Kremlin? Is there some kind of master plan going on here, would you think?
Well, you have to wonder. Has he set up the path for himself? It's pretty clear where he's going. He's met zero resistance so far, maybe a couple of air attacks, and he seems to have fended off at least one of them. But basically, he's moved north unscathed. It's a shocking development. So either he's got collaborators on the ground in senior positions with the Russian military, or spontaneously Russian units on the ground are taking his side in this conflict. There's probably no one in Russia who is more skeptical of the Ukrainian invasion than those who serve in Russian uniform. They know at any minute they could go into that meat grinder and probably end up dead. So they're the ones who are Prigozhin's. That's the group he's trying to appeal to, and it appears that it's working pretty well.
Initially and ostensibly, you say, oh, Vladimir Putin, he could lose control of Russia, he could fall. That'd be great. But, of course, it wouldn't necessarily be great because then we have a vacuum. How do you think it might play out? If Putin does fall, if he loses his grip on power, what's going to happen?
Well, things will probably get worse. And I'm not saying that means we should come to Putin's defense or anything, but it's always a safe bet to assume you will be disappointed by events in Russia. Prigozhin is a monster. He is unethical. He's a liar. He's a killer. And if he takes power, this is the guy who has interfered in elections around the world, who has launched coups. He interfered in the U.S. election in 2016 and the impact of that depends on who you talk to. So this is a bad guy. He is not a good person. It is not good for anyone if he takes over Russia.
As I said earlier, let's a few words about Putin. I mean, it was very striking how nervous, pale, kind of faltering that he seemed during that speech. His speeches are usually heavily scripted. They usually go on for about 16 to 17 hours. It didn't strike me this was scripted. He was speaking nervously from the heart, I thought. This is a man in serious trouble, isn't it?
Well, he had to go out there and say something just so people knew he was alive. Right? Things are going very badly in Russia. They're effectively martial law in Moscow right now, or something close to it. You're quite correct. Normally, Putin is very scripted. He concentrates on body language. He conveys this kind of sense that he's the alpha, and he's kind of desperate to do it at all times. He wasn't able to put that together quickly enough to do his little proof of life video. So I think clearly he is in a corner, as you said. There's a rumor he's left Moscow for St. Petersburg. Unclear if that's true. He's very good at kind of covering up where he actually is at any given moment. So I wouldn't assume that he has left. But he's in real trouble. He is in mortal danger.
Yeah, I mean, we can't say anything concrete, obviously, but it's fair to speculate that this could be the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin. Sure. I think we should absolutely be anticipating something like that. And even if he does survive, things are going to be very different in Russia going forward. These events are a huge exposure of the fact that the Russian government is effectively a shell of what people thought it was. The fact that a rebel group can simply drive up from Ukraine to the outskirts of Moscow in a few hours and threaten to take over the government is shocking. The Russian military should be, we all thought was capable, large, had a lot of resources, a lot of equipment, a lot of sophisticated technology. None of it appears to be helping them at this point. So even if Putin does survive, what is he left with in Russia? A completely deflated balloon of a country. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. I think probably not a great idea to guess, but I will go ahead and predict that things are going to be very different in Russia a week from now than they were yesterday. Absolutely. Last question, really, Lester. Try to sum up. Huge overarching question, by the way. Try to sum up why this has gone so terribly wrong for Putin. What is the essence of the mistake he's made here?
Well, I think this is Putin. At the end of the day, Putin doesn't have anyone around him who will tell him what is really happening. He rules through fear. He rules by threat. He is barely holding on to power, it is clear. And so there's no one around him who is a responsible person who can tell him, here's the real threat from Ukraine. Here's what's going to happen if we invade. Here's the problem with launching the Wagner group into the middle of this war. Here are the problems with conducting foreign policy the way you do. Here's the problem with becoming overextended and sending our troops all the way down 800 miles away to Ukraine. You're going to leave us vulnerable here in Moscow. There are no truth tellers around him. He has built up a system that is doomed. He's in his own doom loop here, and he's reaping the consequences of these decisions he's made over the last 20 or so years in a way that's probably going to be fatal for him.